What
Wow.
up, Dave?
Hey, hey.
Hey,
How's it
hey.
going?
Oh, it's going great.
It's like we weren't talking before this.
What did you
This is
say?
this is our first this is our first talk as us all three on the call.
All right,
No,
so
but
let's get into it.
I want to get into it because I think it's a great topic that we have. So the statement, never attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence. What do you say about that? Especially in the physical training world.
Well, I think first of all, you got to say, is it never say never, or how often do you get to say never? Right. So there goes one. And what I would say is that in context of, our time, right? This, sort of slow, choppy awakening. I would say that no, probably the first reflex, uh, it should be to attribute to where could this be malice, and be on guard for that, because that seems to be a theme in the greater world right now. It's crazy, but then what I would counter is in the fitness industry. I would not attribute malice. Okay, there is no ill intent in terms of malice and to consciously want to do harm to an athlete. This is deeper than that psychologically. This is something where the limbic crisis and the certainty that was necessary to bite into this nonsense, you had to be, you're sort of triggered, and the guys next to you, the crabs in the bucket, and you're all sort of going right, and you're all, this is defining you, and you've sort of put your reputation, your credibility is, the stiff spine is stable, and that became sort of just doctrine, dogma. And they're not bad people. There's not a bad person in the group. It's more a fear of, oh shit, the Bosu guy, right? They Science of exercise, when it comes to biomechanics, nobody has malice to try to misinform you. It is 100% incompetence, but it crosses the line into willful ignorance is where the problem has been. Because I've been
Mhm.
saying the same thing long time. So anyway, that's how I would say that, um, in all fairness, right? Because I think it's always important to stick to what you believe is actually true, right? And align yourself with that, as opposed to having to sort of, oh, well, oops, I got to be here. Oops, I got to be there. And the last thing, have you guys heard of the science wars that are happening with the YouTube science influence? I mean, do you get this? Is like, I
Oh
mean,
I
yeah.
mean,
it's
you could look at
juicy.
Mike Israel's dissertation. That was
Oh,
interesting.
Simon Nelson. The guy's name is Simon Nelson. And then this guy, like, I have to admit, I do indulge in some of this stuff. Greg Doucette makes me laugh. And I
Yeah.
mean, you couldn't have set it up better. And then Jeff Niptard. Oh, did you see what happened to him? Oh my gosh.
No.
Simon Nelson. I mean, it's just, oh, wow. Okay. That's who you are. Got it. Understand. But
I
anyway,
got I gotta look at that one because it's interesting. I mean, like the popularity of the social media right now
oh,
is the bodybuilding. It's the this is how you get athletic. There's no other way because this is science. And so little by little it becomes less about the feeling of the body and more about what's being said on a paper.
science is something that we need, but we are doing the scientific process, scientific method. When we observe, we hypothesize, we test, we, either confirm or not, and then back to it, observe, right? And many of us in the industry are actually doing that. It's become sort of the construction of it in its, formal, authorized, okay, bureaucratic sense that, oh, yeah, you've done science now, yay, right? That's what exercise science is.
Right.
Right. And exercise science is mostly the chemistry of how can we juice the body to grow bigger and leaner and stronger and all those things, all the just your red blood cells, right? The Lance Armstrongs, right? Just endurance itself. So that is great science. And there are high stakes and there's a lot of money involved in that. So the scientists that are attracted to that are extremely clever. Not only do you have to figure out what works, but you have to figure out how no one else is going to figure out what works, right? So you're talking about a lot of brain power attracted by a lot of money. And then you have, sort of the of sets and reps and the, sort of the formulas for building mass and the formulas for endurance and formula for power and strength, all that stuff. And that's a pretty simple science with some variability, but it's pretty simple.
I mean, even when we go into the physical therapy science, though, when we're talking about Squat
Yeah, well,
University, we're talking about
no, but that's where we're going is because now we have the biomechanics. Okay, now I'm saying biomechanics is therapy. Even well, you also have the energetics, but if you don't understand the biomechanics, well, then energetics doesn't mean anything other than that's the least scientific thing that there could possibly be. Therefore, it must be rejected. It would be the typical stance as it stands right now, right? So the biomechanics is, unfortunately, it's just the softest science there is. When it comes to walking, when it comes to designing, how you're going to ride your bicycle, where there's a lot of money, well, now you're going to get high brain power, you get wind tunnels, you get all that stuff because, taking 5 ounces off that costs an extra $5,000, there's money, right? There's concept. Now biomechanics, you walking better, you running better. Where's the money in that? The military has to do it for carrying, burden. How are you going to design the knapsack to do it or whatever? A lot of that's already done. But aside from that, unless it's money making, like the guys teach you how to golf ball better or whatever, if it's just biomechanics of motion, it's not even science because they didn't observe movement correctly. As the golfer's spine passes through neutral at ball contact, how can you claim that you're a biomechanist in science and spinal function if that's sort of your observation? It's something that you're portraying because you've so convinced yourself with this theory, right? The bureaucratic, I have 200 and counting peer-reviewed published papers. All I see is paper. I don't see anything else but just paper. So anyway, I've been doing all the talking, but that's sort of, I think, the green as it is. And now it's play ball. And, I think we're on the back nine, as they would say.
How do you take, for someone listening, how do you take new information and come to believe it? If it's something that's not commonly talked about or it's not in the research papers, you were talking about energetics, we were talking about new, biomechanics, or we could talk about, fascia, we could talk about anything that's not as common. What is the process to where you make it to where you actually believe it? I think it's like scrutiny and informed guesses. I say conjectures and criticisms, and you put it through your own scrutiny and you test it out. But what advice do you have for when we're trying to learn something new to actually come to believe it or see it? What do you say to that?
Well, I say that when I was a younger man, I was guilty of, making up my mind before it should have been made up in the wrong direction, right? And pretty darn certain of it, right? So it's it's one of there's a certain amount of humility that one will gain once you've had your sort of like, the slap in the face that you thought this, but it turned out to be that kind of a thing. I think people are on guard against that slap in the face. So that tends to, you know, if it even appears, well, no, they ain't gonna slap me in the face. So I don't know that I have any advice on that other than you got to go through it to get through it. If that's how you feel, you're not going to pretend otherwise. And you might not even be aware that you're doing it because of the confirmations bias that, you know, you and your clan or tribe or whatever your brethren, um, the peer pressure is severe for you to break ranks with those who believe a certain thing, you know.
Your your answer made me because I was thinking about like you look at like a traditional college weight room S&C guy, and then you think about the fascia guys, and it's just I don't know, they tend to disagree. So that's why I was asking like, how do you come up with something new? But it sparked whenever you were answering. I wanted to ask you about your experience with. I feel bad because I don't know his name, but the human garage, the fascia guy,
oh yeah, Gary,
Gary.
yeah. It was fascinating because there is legitimacy to what he is doing, and I would consider myself an expert, you know, that starts at the skin, then goes deep, right? His whole approach was sort of like, okay, I'm beginning the session at your aura. So, you know, the boundary of this toroidal energy field, which is, you know, 6 feet away or whatever. So
And
I
that's
think
energetics.
it's exactly, it's energetics. And but mine, you know,
Wow.
touch for
Wow.
me, massage and therapy, that's energetics. That's energetics. It's different, you know, a human being with healing touch is different than, you know, a wooden thing.
We got to talk about that. I just wrote that down, but I want to hear about your experience with Gary too.
Yeah. So my experience with him is that he himself has a certain just calm and presence and sort of the feeling that he's on the right path at the right pace with the right people. So, you know, I think if he were stuck in traffic, he wouldn't be getting as upset as I do.
That's a good
Right.
one. That's a good
So
explanation.
for me, that's naturally a good energy to be proximal to because now you got a big, strong polarity. You got a guy who gets hotter and hot and angry and furious rage versus a guy who's sort of, you know, arrived on a side where I think he, you know, really puts out that calming energy. Um, so I am very sensitive. I know when something, you know, is just sort of, oh, do you feel this? So I had change. And so there's definitely something to what he does. And um, I think looking at it as like sort of breakthroughs and rites of passage, as I try and even think of my own work, is like rope flow, for example, would just be like a rite of passage that once you've assimilated it and done enough reps, you could let it go, right? And move on to another door that unlocks with a different key and then after some time, revisiting the ropes will then refine the keys on that key that you have, right? So you can gain depth with that approach. So,
I don't want to ask all the questions either, Andrew, but I'm like every time you say something I'm like another question, another question, another question. So, okay, I do want to still talk about the energetics when it comes to body work because that's very interesting. Like if someone's like down in bad spirits and then they're putting their hands on you trying to manipulate, I wonder the effects of that. But before we do that, I want to ask you about two things. Well, I have a lot of things, but let's do these two first. All right. So the Instagram videos we all saw with you and Gary. So
oh,
I want to know about the affirmations and that's effect, and then also the ear fascial move. I want to hear about that
what? Yeah,
one.
what I would say again is maybe the dynamic between the two of us and affirmations is just sort of, you know, resonating with a little bit more gentle harmony calm that allows me to, because I was very sore in my body then. I had that joint pain systemic, and as a matter of, he gave me these turmeric tablets that were, helping with the inflammation. And then I started taking this diatomaceous earth that he gave me a bag of it. Like that's how I got started on it, just sort of, leaching all this bad stuff out of me. And the affirmations, I was an actor, right? The power of words is tremendous. I'm a lexicographer. I love the study of words. And as Andrew knows, that there is something
Yep.
to sort of the manipulation of the wind with the tongue and the mouth and all of you. So I would say that I don't know what someone who's nice and relaxed would feel, but I felt some remedy in being able to move with less pain through a greater range of motion from that. And the affirmations, like, I don't know if another person told me to do the same thing, maybe it doesn't work. Right. So maybe it's, the singer's not the song that makes the music move along in that case. Right.
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
do
it's
you think
very.
the confidence of Gary telling
It's
you to say these affirmations allowed them to feel more true?
100%. And Brett, when you just asked about, like, the massage worker, and if they were depressed, obviously that wouldn't be the ideal state. But the number one most important thing that you can feel from hands or body parts is confidence
Mm,
and care, right? If if the person doesn't feel confident, and your lower brain will probably know it, even if your intellect doesn't, you're not going to trust the touch, right?
mhm.
Okay, well, you're beginning from nothing, right? And if you don't feel safe, like, you saw your friend, limp off the table because the adjustment didn't work, then you're going to be guarded and nothing good will happen. But
Will the
confidence is the body's weight with the energetics of physical integrity, because that is what is physically confident.
if we're looking
Mm.
at the energetics, will the body, will your body as the client reject the body worker? Like, will it reject their, like my body doesn't want this, I don't know how to even like phrase it.
Yeah.
This energy going into my tissues. I mean,
Well, yeah, and what you're going for is, you're going for,
because not everyone's going to be operating in this state of enlightenment. I mean, people
no,
have
of
bad
course not.
days, and like you're
No, of
going
course
in and
not.
doing your job, which is massage therapy.
Yeah, of course, of course. Well, yeah, if you go to Massage Envy and you work a 9 to 5 corporate job, well, then that massage is just, you put some oil on it, do some stroking, it'll feel good, right? But you're not doing like the work in that
Right.
scenario. Now,
Right.
and that's not to say there, some people just have the touch, and the more they do it, the better they get at it. And some
Yeah.
people don't have the touch, and that's just that. And some people don't offload the tension that they accumulate as well when they're a beginner. So they lack the endurance, because it truly is about your body's weight, where you are committed and your both parties are safe. You're not afraid of slipping out of a position that would hurt them or hurt you, or just, be embarrassing, right? And they can feel that there's no sort of like nervous static apprehension. It's 100% present. It's just rooted, and the energetic exchange of that is confidence, and you'll come along for the ride, and the ride is positive change on the table, right?
Well,
So go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say it's interesting because like when we talk about energetics, and I didn't know we were gonna talk about energetics, but I've only really read one book on it, and it was a really good book. I guess I've studied a little bit more than that, but it's very spiritual when you think about it. Like a lot of these practices and can be very much related to religion or other spiritual practices that people get into.
Yeah, yeah, I think it all has to do what's the alternative means by which you can spend your time and entertain your brain or just pass the time. So I think in the modern, we're on these phones and you ain't pulling me away from this phone to go do some breathing on a mountain. I'm not going. I'm sticking here with the phone. It's more interesting for me. But if you go back in time when you didn't have distraction, right? You didn't have the light pollution at night. You're sort of more within the natural cycles. Well, you need to feed yourself every day is basically what it is every day. Give us this day our daily bread. And so just that becomes sort of okay, I take care of the physical. And now what else do you do with your time? You don't even have books. You go on how you feel and you align yourself and you feel as though, oh, wow, I feel lighter. I'm bored stiff, but I don't care. I feel great. We don't feel good, so we need distraction, right? If you locked us in a room with no stimuli, you'd go completely insane because our brain does this and we're short circuiting. And if you carry a 5G phone, you're just not possible to resonate with sort of the ethereal woo woo and the earth Schumann resonance. So shoe man, right? You put your foot on the ground, you get the shoe man.
So one thing I want to go into that I think ties all of this together, it all comes down to feeling. When we're talking about the trying
Yes.
new exercises, when we're talking about trying new theory, and even the scientists that are putting out this sports science, this exercise science, there's a lack of feeling. There's a lack of
Yeah.
understanding,
Yeah.
true understanding, because you can't understand movement unless you feel it.
Sensation.
Sensation.
Yes. And so you have the sensory and motor cortices. So that's your fundamental sort of, feedback and mechanistic, you know, feel this, do that, right? Um, and the forebrain, you get to rehearse and plot out patterns, right? And then practice them until they become reduced down to the lower brain where thought is no longer the case, right? And thought will actually get in the way once the activity is ingrained deep enough that thought is so far removed. If you were to take a pen and a paper and just write out the steps for tying your shoes, you'd probably have to put down the pencil, actually go to phases in tying your shoe and say, what actually am I even doing when I tie my shoe? Right?
Hmm.
It's just autopilot, right?
Right.
So I think in terms of back to this energetics, the energetics of presence. And I was actually reflecting on this morning because when I first invented the Bosu ball, one of the activities that fascinated me was 1 foot eyes closed. And the first prototypes were pretty spongy, so that, I was able to offer $100 for 10 seconds, 1 foot eyes closed at trade shows to thousands of people. And I
I
never
remember.
and I never had to pay $100 because it was really, really hard to do. And I remember I had a fascination with it. I was sort of listening to Miles Davis. I put on Live at Montreux. I'd have red wine in the stem glass, eyes closed in my little apartment, drinking wine, balancing 1 foot eyes closed on a Bosu ball. And then bored at a trade show one day, I think I did more than 10 minutes in a row. And I remember
Wow.
just like, just being tired from standing on 1 foot for 10 minutes. But what I loved about that is I'm pretty high strung. Like I'm in a car is where I know it's true. Because if I'm in a car and traffic comes or something impedes my progress and it doesn't need to, I literally get angry and I express it. I'll start screaming. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know, but I'm a monster. And I don't, I'm nowhere else am I as bad, but I mean, it's coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that the fluidity, and I'm going to go with whatever comes. I'm not going to resist it. I'm going to go with it. I'm going to ride it, right? I'm going to be in that balance and that sort of right at the perfect harmony of it without effort. And I got very good at that. And I think what that does is it helps reset threat of falling. So everybody has the survival reflex, and if it's triggered, it's gone. So a reflex doesn't get to, fire and then say, "Oh no, no, it fires, it fired." Right?
So
So
I want to get into that a little bit because you're in the book. The most fascinating part, the part that resonated with me the most, was the softness, learning the softness, learning to go with the flow.
yeah,
And I think you attributed a little bit to reading about Feldenkrais. And
100%.
go into that a little bit more because that's something that I feel like most of the world struggles with.
Yeah, especially the Western world where bigger, faster, stronger, bigger, faster, stronger is the short-term advantage, right? So,
Mhm.
you know, and you have to almost go through hard before you earn. You have to almost go through a hard, then go through a soft to get back to a hard that's truly hard, if that makes
Mhm.
sense, right?
Right.
Because hard without informed by soft is not efficient. So it's not as powerful. It doesn't have the staying power. None of the things can be optimized unless it's integrated, right? And
Mhm.
harmonic, in balance, right? And that creates sensation that the lower brain can trust. So we have the intellect, okay? The problem is if the intellect does not have the support of the lower brain system, right? The orchestrator, if there is incongruency, this lower brain is not confident. It knows that it's firing some line of muscles in your back to make up for the fact that you ain't funneling the force to the floor with efficiency. This upper brain now has to sort of reconcile that irritant, that tension rising. And so it's going to ascribe it to whatever, and it won't be to that. Okay. So they'll start to rigidify their mind that can't be resolved unless you let it go. And that's why an ego event is so powerful, because picture the ego is like, it's rain and it's ice, like it's cold, so they're just getting coated in ice and ice and ice, and at some point you're not going to melt it, right? It's going to crack and shatter, and there'll be a sudden release of freedom, that this certainty that they clung to and they squeezed harder and they did more reps and they prayed to the altar of McGill and his straitjacket even deeper, and they just wouldn't let go, and they hated the Bosu ball, and God damn it, that whole hard shell suddenly cracked, and they lost to the Bosu guy. The guy that they said was the softy or the loser or whatever, right? The unscientific, the fraud, the charlatan. And I think that is going to suddenly give license, because it's not just a handful of people. This is
Mhm.
hundreds of thousands of fitness professionals who have been certified over the past 20 years that are just saying the wrong script, and they're talking wrong when it comes about walking. So,
And
boom, we're going to switch that. And now, if you're in a group of just peer reviewed trainers, just point your hand across the other side of the circle. You're both guilty. You both messed up, right?
Mhm.
You both believe something that in hindsight, I'm glad that I never believed it, because I would, well, no, it's not true. Probably when I was 18, I did believe it, because that's what I was told to do, right? Squeeze, don't let your head move. That was always like the thing. Hold potato chips and don't let your head move. Like, okay. Like that was running instruction. So maybe
so
I
back
believed it then. But as a fitness professional, it was Feldenkrais who planted the seed, because he said one of the indicators of good movement is reversibility. And the first thing I thought of is I can't reverse walking. once I start to go off that foot, I can't stop it. I can't reverse it. And it was a conundrum because like how could how could walking be impossible to reconcile reversibility, right?
Mm.
Oh, well, what it is it's that side locate to side locate that you don't have to commit to until you want to, that is reversible, right?
So you're saying the stopping, like the falling type of walking, you can't stop in the middle of it because you're falling.
If you're falling and not dropping into balance, right? There's a difference. The falling implies that it's like you don't have the vertical reconciliation coming up, right?
Right.
If I drop, it is to suggest that there is something that I'm dropping, right? And now I'm going to boom, use the drop
Mhm.
to load whatever's next, right? And balance is really about the potential to do what comes next now. Okay, that is a great definition of balance, and it doesn't fall into a trap of like trying to describe this constant present state that if you drill it down, when is it, right? Oh, it just already happened. Oh yeah, we missed. It's happening, right?
Wait, repeat that for the audience, please, because that's a powerful statement.
Which part?
Balance is
Oh, balance is happening.
right.
Right? It has a ring to the happening.
It's the ability to control the next part
It's
before it
the yes,
happens.
it's the ability to do what comes next now without hesitation, no apprehension, right? I don't have to move before I move. I'm ready to move now, right? Productively. I'm gonna catch the rabbit, right? I'm gonna get away from the tiger, right? It's timing, 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 timing.
And so this goes back to the is it malice? Because think about where you were when you learned all this stuff.
It's malice against me for sure, 100%. And it's malice against, even at some level, it's malice against themselves. Like there's a certain, I don't know. I think when
Information
you're,
is out there.
well, I think what
Information.
happens is if you allow yourself to get trapped in the sort of conventional bucket,
Mhm.
where it's there are the rules. When the bell rings, you get up off the chair and you go over there, right? Okay, and the bell rang, go do that, right? So there's sort of this cohesive, I'm part of it. And I think if you're if you're there, I don't know, you're vulnerable to you're vulnerable to the bully culture where you'll just not bother. And I remember like when I did squats in high school, I could not go light. I would never psychologically be able to do less than 4 plates with at least a 10 and a 5 clanging and probably a 25 clanging, right? Because I was so caught up on how skinny my legs were and how I wanted them to be bigger and stronger that I couldn't even be perceived by others if all I did was 135, or to even put 185 on the bar was insulting, because why can't you just
Mhm.
skip to 225, right? And I remember also like any wedge under the heels, I never ever even entertained it, because that would be so, I would have been ostracized. They would have kicked me out of the weight room if I tried to slide a 5 underneath my heels, right? So I fell prey to the bully culture of just limiting my self exploration, self expression, right? Reining myself in that would have no cost or harm against anyone else if I did 185 and tried to work on the finer points, right? Or if I explored with, hey, what does this do or that do? And I think I've had an extraordinary life with a lot of ups and downs and challenges and experiences that most people aren't going to have that same magnitude and degree and number of events in life that are boom, what most people would consider life events, right?
Mhm.
So from my perspective, I've been tumbled in the laundry, right? And, just boom, boom, boom. And I came out of it, right? And I, dried my hair off, put a little bit of tallow in it, put my persoles on, and here and now, right? So, so so my experience, I don't even trust my experience to be close enough to what a normal person experiences, because for the past 20 years I've lived pretty an unrealistic life in terms of, what I want to do is what I get to do. So, go to Chinese medical school. All right. That's what I'm doing. Right. Oh, do this, do that. So the rough and tumble of it gives me just the ability now that I don't know what I believe, but I'm prepared to believe that which would have been unbelievable. And I'm prepared for it to be on the surface from this perspective so ridiculously absurd that you could never believe it. And I'm prepared to believe it at this point. Like
That's
I truly
interesting.
am.
I
You know what
like
I mean?
that.
Like
I like that. Say that again. You said, I don't know
what
what to believe, but I'm prepared to believe the unbelievable,
Yeah,
I think is what you just said.
I'm prepared to believe the like unbelievably
So
unbelievable.
what would be something unbelievable? I guess if you can
I
think
don't
about
know
it.
that some sleaze stack lizards are underneath Antarctica and they,
Okay, well, I was talking
I'm
about
just
more
saying,
like
like, I'm just saying, like, it could be anything. It could be anything.
So,
I mean, think about it. If they
That's
knew
true. It
something.
really is true, especially in this
No, but think
day.
about it. Think about if there's some space-time continuum, okay? And if you don't press the button at the right time, then the whole thing never was. Oh boy, now you got my attention. And maybe the lizards are like, look, here's the way it works. We're
Oh my
just ding
God.
ding, and you need to get that bing ding to ding ding. And Trump and all Cash Patel are like, okay, I thought I was gonna
I
do
mean,
this,
the
but
ocean is an interesting one because the ocean, I think it's like 90% is undiscovered.
well, where do you think the sleaze stack are coming in and out of? Right? The Antarctica, they're under the ocean. They're not just in the ice. Come on now.
so wait, let's draw this back in a little bit. I
I'm exaggerating to make a point, of
Yeah,
course.
of course, but I definitely want to go back to attributing to Malice because you you were able to learn this stuff. I'm able to learn this stuff. Brett is able to learn this stuff. We haven't gone to the extents that you've gone to, going to Chinese medical school, spending all these years learning the fascia, going to these different events, going to these different practitioners and being able to spend all this time. But the internet exists. The amount of information that's available and the amount of testing you could do on your own. Because, for example, when I first found your work, I don't know what it is. Let me try that out. Okay, cool. Oh, I feel something. There's something to it. Let me learn more. That's where Malice is attributed because regular people like me at 18 years old being able to learn a lot of this stuff with without the science degrees, without the peer reviewed studies. If a regular 18-year-old can learn this, it becomes Malice at that point because it's available.
What Yeah, and what I would say is that we're gonna, hate the game more than you hate the player, because the player is just a weak man who is playing the game, right?
Hmm.
As it is played to win, which is, I got to get a PhD. I'll do the minimal effort. Okay, boom. Now I'm a PhD. Now I get to say doctor. And now blah, blah, blah. Right. And, it's not the greatest sin ever, but it does undermine fundamentally a faith and trust in science. Right.
Yeah. I mean, if we
So,
look at the amount of money per year
well,
almost that's advancing.
if we look at the standards, well, then what are they worth, right? And I've been to a dermatologist who told me that diet has nothing to do. They did a study with prisoners. They gave them chocolate. Their skin was fine, whatever. So there's a lot of institutional mistrust. And I think the malice for me is really, it's like inward on the industry itself. Like they don't have malice to the suburban affluent kids who they're milking the parents to do Paloff presses, shuffle them in through the gauntlet. Here we go. Foam roll over there. Do your little tall
That's
kneeling.
what I was just about to say. Is like it's really not
Like,
on the like the person running their own gym or the coach. Like they want the best, but it's really these like social media wars and these
yeah,
social media guys.
it's factions within the industry competing for share of industry or reward, um, and so and bad behavior is met with attention, right?
Mhm.
So if you attack, you will get eyeballs, and then depending upon the nature of it, it will go to certain, ever so far as it shall, or the direction in which it happens, right? So I remember you had Naudi Aguilar and Brett Contreras had this vitriolic, sort of hate back and forth for some years. This is going back. And then they had a debate, right, where they talked on a debate. And I listened to it, right, because to me, it's better than the housewives of whatever, better than Shark Tank. I mean, it's just interesting, sort of fun to see, like, whoa, like the whole thing's unnecessary, but it is necessary perhaps to put certain people in their places, right?
Mhm.
At least that's the attitude of both of them. And then what was interesting about it was that, and this is what tends to happen, is when they got on the phone call, suddenly the approach changed, and it was one of sort of a conciliatory. And now he kept on asking Brett, like, Brett, you should come try this. I want you to try this. So I think now he just wanted to be recognized and heard and listened to, which is natural. That's what I want. I want to be heard and listened to. Um, and I think, you know, my situation is I'll call anybody out, right? But who's going to interview me on that subject,
Dave, aren't you
right?
supposed to do? Didn't you recently talk about doing something? Was it with Brett Contreras or was it with someone
Well,
else?
it was, but it was sort of just this. I would love to, but he made some comment on something to do with sprinting, and the comment had to do with it's not the spinal engine, it's the hip engine. And I would not have otherwise jumped in with a comment, but I did jump in with a comment, said, okay, that gonna need some answer some simple questions here on this one. And then he replied with, I didn't even read the reply. I regret that I didn't, and I don't know where the hell comment or post it's on, but I remember it was a reply that was more than just a sentence. And it basically it says something about like, I'm not sure if you're willing to listen and learn, but sprinters have to do this, that, the other thing because of some horizontal force. And I just stopped reading it, but I did lick my chops and I said, thank you so much for responding to me because at least this is communication. Um, and I was just basically baiting because he doesn't want to have a debate with me on gait. And then he came back with a comment, like I said, look, great, you're communicating. Let's have a debate. Let's have a conversation or whatever you want to call it. Let's just make the gait the subject, sprinting if we want, and now let's talk about it, right?
Mhm.
And he said, well, actually, sprinting is just a hobby of mine. So I would need 30 days to, review the research and then I would be ready to debate. And I'm just like, oh my God, you don't even know what you said there, dude. Like,
Yeah,
this
and
is
that's
this is my life, right? This is no job. All I do is this for more than 20 years. And you're gonna go review science for 30 days. And now you're ready to debate? Like, I mean, just and so I think he probably realized that if you're gonna step in the ring with Mayweather, you don't just try to throw like that. And
Wait, so I do want to get on the topic of gait though, because I recently started going down the rabbit hole of naughties beefs on the internet, and one of them being Adam Meekins. And one of the things that the science-based community talks about is gait having no, how do you say it, correlation between pain and mood. And you know what? I think that is absolutely wild. I think it's
that's the
wild. He was saying,
dermatologist. That's the dermatologist. Food don't matter. Your skin is your skin. Your diet's your diet. Not even on the same plane. Like,
so
are you?
science says it doesn't matter. Science essentially is saying that the gait pattern doesn't matter, and we all three of us know that it does. But how do you debate with somebody who's going to look at the science to say there's no correlation?
Well, first of all, if this person is who I think it is, this Adam Meekins, he's blocked on my end. I will have nothing to do with a person like that. So I don't care from him. I don't want to know about him. If I ever meet him, I'll just be like, look, you lost your chance. Get on your knees and, whatever. Like, he's just not a part of what I ever need. Um, Others will teach him my work, and he will bend the knee to reality and by proxy to me. So, and I don't even know much about him. I just remember his behavior on the internet, blocked, blocked. I don't need that, let alone argue with that nonsense. So Nowdy, on the other hand, is someone who bites ankles. So you think that it's done and you think that it's settled. And then one of his minions, jumps out, with the ambush, gotcha. Oh, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, behind closed doors, we have a conversation. You agree to pull your little rabid dogs off of me, right? Like, just don't have your followers attack. Right. And then I get people come in the lab. They're like, oh, I'm kicked out of functional patterns. Like, what do you mean kicked out? What the hell are you talking about? Oh, well, this, that, the other thing. And, oh, yeah. It's almost like in his syllabus is a chapter on why I'm wrong and why he's better because, they have results and Weck method doesn't have results. I don't know what the fuck that even means. But in this industry,
Can we go to that for a second? Like
no,
the results page is guys standing with their shoulders up and their lats puffed, and that's the results page.
listen. If you're gonna define that, and I take this very, very seriously, like, how am I gonna define what is fundamental? Because if I define the fundamentals incorrectly, or not most accurate and leverageable for results, well, then what am I doing? So if I'm going to say that the fundamentals are, what does he say? Standing, walking, running, throwing. Okay. I'm not even going to talk about standing because I can't go get food standing. I don't give a shit about standing. Okay. I want to locomote. I want to go from here to there. I am going to spend no time trying to set up how I'm going to stand as like the first step because everything changes as soon as the battle begins, right? You got to lift one foot. Oh, I know how to stand. It's silliness. And then if you're not going to include swinging precedes throwing if you want to understand the mechanics. I mean, come on, right? I mean, learn how to swing to facilitate your pattern to throw, especially if you're going to throw a baseball, you got a softball this way as opposed to, a
So
javelin or a football.
I have
And
a
then
question. I have a question.
catching and carrying, right? So my point is that if you're going to begin with a foundation that is what I would call nonsense because it's not the most productive, it's not the most accurate. And now that's why you're going to feature people who, okay, well, you're supposed to squeeze your butt, but, do this, but that, and this, and you look very uncomfortable, very unnatural. And as soon as you stop thinking, you're going to stop doing it. Right. And then you foam roll for 4 months and you get fantastic results. I
All right.
want them to win. I want them to win. I do.
So if you were to have a debate with somebody, and it could be anybody, and it would, it's going to happen to make the most impact on the industry.
Yeah.
What would that debate be, or interview?
Well,
I think
I
you've
think,
already pretty much kind of skyrocketed to really the point where everyone knows the work and knows the name. Maybe they haven't researched the work, but they know. But
well,
what would that
it's,
debate be?
I actually think that a Brett Contreras, great gate debate with Brett Contreras would be incredible. And
Yeah.
I think what it would be is, I think it would be very friendly because I think I'm not coming at that one angry. I'm coming at that one where it's like, I'm here to help a friend quit drinking kind of a vibe. You know what I mean? Like it's not even a debate, right? Let's not even pretend. And if we want to pretend, well, then you present your PowerPoint. Then we'll proceed to pick it apart, right, and get you on the right page. But I think that that's really what this is about. This is mending the personal vitriolic distaste and disdain for each other, right? And I have not made it easy for them to like me. I've not made it easy for them to bend the knee to reality because I felt so unjustly harmed with their attack on the Bosu ball and sort of validating that attack and fanning the flames of that attack. And then I take it personally, but I also, it's an affront to humankind. How many athletes did not benefit from that device as one piece of the puzzle? And now they didn't get the scholarship because their ankles broke up, right? So, and I, honest to God, think of it like that. And then I think of like, okay, well, tell me another story. How is it beneficial that you poisoned the Bosu ball for an entire industry, the most educated branch of the industry? In fact, right? The guys who
Yeah.
look at the Mike Israetels and think he's a fraud just because he's popular, right? I'm a strength coach. Nobody knows who I am. I'm the best because I have
Right.
integrity, right? Oh yeah, blah blah blah, right? That and so
Which it is respectable.
what's that?
Yeah, I said it's respectable, you know.
Oh, listen, no, listen. It is the most respectable thing one can do is work with kids and help them have a better life. I mean, you want to talk
100%.
about,
Yeah. And
why are
I heard you like
what's
saying
that?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when you were saying that, I heard you saying that, but I wanted to, say it word for word. Like I could hear that kind of in the undertone of what you were
Yeah.
saying,
Well,
because it is like very respectful to spend the 4 years, spend the 8 years, the 10 years, right, and learn about how to train, a young
yes.
athlete.
Yes. Well, I mean, Alex Canellis, that's how he became like one of the greatest coaches ever was, and he even said, the NFL dream ended and he's just like, okay, I'm going to humble myself. I'm going back to my high school. I'm going to be the greatest communicator in the world. And I think that, setting a mark that you're going to be the greatest in the world is not necessarily a bad mark to set if you want to motivate yourself to work as hard as you possibly can, right?
100%.
And be smart about what you're going to fight for and what you're going to let go, right? If I insisted that I'm the best defensive back in all of football, well, that's probably the wrong, rabbit to chase because I don't think I catch that one, right? So figuring out where you can add value to things or create new things is like that's the charge. That's what you should do.
Have you ever thought about doing I know you have your own book coming out. Have you thought about doing a textbook? I know you have the certification too, but like here's why I ask, because a lot of my book recommendations that I've got come from listening to the college strength and conditioning coaches. So like I've learned that information as well, and I get a lot of my book recommendations from them, and they're great book recommendations. But I don't feel like the alt fit. I don't even know if you want to call it that, but let's call it that because we know what we're talking about. There's no textbooks for that category, like a legitimate textbook.
Yeah. Um, well, I think that Chris
And
is
there is, but you know what there could be more, really.
well, And I think that, the Tony Hollers of the world will give you sort of like, books that are more general step back look at life and, how to be a winner, who moved my cheese, whatever the heck the book is. It's just good to, as a human being, to have it under your belt, regardless of what field of work you're in. And I would say that Chris Chamberlain is redoing our WEC method qualification, and he's doing it with the assistance of AI. So he is pouring stuff into this thing, and then he's going to make it so that it's a repository, so that in any given subject, you'll be able to electronically go deeper, and it'll be a repository where I just take all of my stuff and I just start feeding it and feeding it. So it's going to be so just the manual itself is going to be comprehensive
I'm excited to get my hands
in a
on that.
manner, and that is Chris's doing.
Wow.
So what I have to say is that who I am and who Chris is are two skill sets and talents and drive that perfectly aligned for the condensing and distilling what it is that I'm doing into the most teachable, systemic means to translate it to others as possible. And
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say that, because the spiral
yeah,
notebook, the current one is very, very dense already.
yeah. Well, this
And
one
it's simple. It's simple.
Well, and that's the magic of it, is that both Alex and Chris, one of their goals when it comes to cueing is fewer words, right? They
Yeah.
Alex wants to say as little as possible, and Chris wants to say as little as possible, so that Andrew, they get an unadulterated feeling without sort of guardrails and a fence to prevent them from even having the wherewithal and the courage to be like, oh, I'm going to figure this out. It doesn't have to be right now. It's more important to onboard it in a manner that it's going to really resonate and sustain. And that's one of the areas where I'm the opposite. Like, my instinct is to get all the little minutia perfect. Like, like, let's do it now. And I'm less typical of sort of the reality of most people's experience. And I understand and recognize that, but it also, the benefit of having Chris as my counterpart, right? My education partner, is that he allows me to go off into the realm of esoteric and explore with the trust that the whole thing, like, this is the choo-choo train, and I'm taking a little drone and going, off train to find out what interests me next. And I'm very, very excited right now at the prospect that hands, and this is an important one, you're going to make this one a little clip unto its own. Hands are the final frontier training tools, training body parts for human movement. The hands are final frontier. Fortunately or unfortunately, they are part of the body. And so if they are not accounted for, then you cannot be fully integrated. You got about 25% of the bone structure, all the long springy tendons are elbows out, knees down, right? And nobody has ever taken hands even close to where I've taken them with core fist. That is core as skeleton, fascially integrated strength training. And in 2010, that was the year when I was completely insane back then. And I met this really kooky realtor, one of the best realtors in San Diego. He wears like this American Sam, Uncle Sam, full red, white, and blue with the top hat and everything, shoes and all. And he rented me the place where I lived when I got separated. And it was this mansion on an acre and a half overlooking San Diego, and nobody could see me because the people who were richer lived above and back further, so they couldn't look down. And the people who didn't have as much money, they were underneath and they really couldn't see up. And so this was my sort of, my layer where I went extremely deep. And then remember this realtor, a real savvy guy, always looking at an angle. I showed him the core fist and some of the hand stuff because I was training that 2010s when I discovered it. So like I was into it like you wouldn't believe. And he's like, this is fascinating. He's like, you need to meet my web guy. I think you could make a fortune with this on the internet. And so okay, I'll meet the web guy. I met the web guy. That's how I met Marty, who's my business partner now.
Wow.
But now, as it comes full circle, if I'm right, and I am, that the best thing that you could do in terms of training for the longest fascial integration is ringing the wrist, fourth finger and thumb, and thumb and fourth finger. And that is the fundamental for coiling fully. Without it, it's not as full. Can't get proximal as long unless you use the distal, right? Whatever your distal is, you got to use it if you want to be complete. And so, if in fact that's a rite of passage, which I believe Nsima trains core fist, Juji Mufu left me a message last week. He's like, David, I was filming and I was doing a bent press and we didn't get it right. We didn't had to keep on doing it. And he's like, my shoulder was hurting me and it was hurting me at rest. Okay, so I had to do something about it because it was hurting me when I'm not doing anything, pain. So he goes, I remembered the core fist that you showed me. I packed it in really, really tight. I squeezed the core fist and the shoulder pain went away.
Wow.
And he goes, it was a bit spooky. And he's like, the harder I pressed in that core fist, the more I could move my shoulder and it didn't hurt anymore during that little window. And he said, obviously I can't walk around all day like this, but when I did it, that's what happened. And so, and it's all it is what he did was the A fist, where it's not the striking one, where I give this a little bit of play where I can hit and that play keeps my whole forearm safe. This is the A fist where you are jamming that middle finger in where it can't go anywhere. I was at a trade show and Ray Boom Boom Mancini had a booth and he had this machine that like had a pad and a spring. and I punched that thing so hard with the A fist that I bottomed out the spring and I tore my muscle up here because the bones just didn't move. So it sent the force to, as soon as it got past the tendon, it got to the muscle, it popped the muscle. It literally tore the muscle from that.
Wow.
And so if I give it just that little bit of leeway, now whatever force gets a little buffered on that side of the triangle and doesn't get jammed inside me. So, but anyway, what Juji was doing was the A fist, where you do create a skeletal circuit that literally like frees the proximal body up to move fluidly with a lot less restriction when you use it as a tool. And I think because the cool kids in the class, like Nsima and Juji Mufu, John Call, Mark Bells of the world, you guys, I think it can make a fortune on the internet now. Because
You know what?
if it's a rite of passage, well, then you sort of got to do it. So that means that now everybody got to do this weird thing, and that's visual equity. That more people that do the weird thing get good at the weird thing, get better at everything else. Well, then the more people willing and wanting to do the weird thing. You see, and I want to make footwear, and I don't want to borrow money. I don't want to borrow money. What I want to do is I want to provide value that gives me cash flow that I can pour into reinvesting into research and development. And I want to make the greatest shoes that have ever been made. And if millions of people are purchasing a core fist course, well, then that happens faster and goes further. So anyway, core fist. I am
Yes,
training it very deep right now.
I just did it right now, but I never focused on pressing the middle finger as hard as I could. My entire line from right here of the trap all the way to my forehead felt like it released.
It is a rite of passage for anyone who wants to navigate and manipulate their body to another level.
But explain that real quick. How come? How come? So we know a little bit about the fascia, but you definitely know way more. So why is it that right here I'm feeling that all in my trap and my forehead?
Okay, the reason why is all of the soft tissue is it is dependent upon the skeletal structure to be useful. If I took the bones out of your body, you'd have no framework and you'd be a jellyfish on the ground. You wouldn't be able to move much, and I don't think you'd get much food and water that way. Okay. Better to float in water and and just filter stuff or come across a fish every now and again that be a jellyfish. So the bone structure will define the capacity of the soft tissue. Hence why shin angle is so important. If my shin is vertical, where can the soft tissue send me? What can the fascia do when the shin is here versus here? Now, at the distal extremity, picture a shoelace and that little cover on the shoelace called the aglet. All right. Without an aglet, it just frays and it can't really, hard to put through the hole to lace the shoe. And it doesn't have like organization. So it can't feed back into proximal. But as soon as I put that perfect aglet on where I have the triangulation of the middle finger as the center of that A fist. And then I bracket that triangle with the ring finger on top, then the index finger in the wedge, and then the thumb and the pinky wrap and envelop. And I'm pulling down with three. I have the middle, I have the fourth, and I have the fifth, all driving. Hence, I have the B fist where I can still maintain that skeletal circuitry where the triangle, as hard as I can, engages the fascia, right? The soft tissue, everything. It engages it where it has a circuit so that there's no break between this and that. If I go to here, my body knows that that's got an end game that's going to break, and I don't want to break. So I'm going to get a pain reflex or a pain signal that says stop. And the lower brain will not continue to drive the effort unless, Junior's under the car and I need to. So by arranging this here, you create a tensional balance here that irradiates to here. We all know that that irradiates, but this gets stuck and it irradiates for stuck, and this irradiates for fluid and fast. And it's the bone structure, core, fist, core. You can think of a core as your torso, right? Your spine and your neck, that's your core. But you also think of your core that reaches the floor as the skeleton. Any slice anywhere in the body is going to have a core bone structure that determines what the soft tissue can do. That makes
It's very
sense?
interesting. I'm doing
Yeah.
something right now, and all I'm doing is just like moving my hands in and out like this. Just playing around really. When I have the core fist, it feels like fluid and it's very interesting. But then when I ball the regular fist, I feel it more in like the joints,
And
if that makes
if you squeeze the regular fist and try to swing, the arm via the shoulder or move the
yeah, it's
elbow,
like
you will restrict the fluidity
that's what
because
I feel. Yeah, exactly. It's very interesting.
what's happening is think of
You feel that,
flex.
Andrew?
Yeah, I
Feel how it
feel
like
like
relieves
my
pressure
muscles
off the
stopping
elbow
me.
and shoulder.
Like my muscles are stopping me, but when I'm here, I'm feeling
Yeah,
more
like all I'm doing is
connected to
just
where
like
it's like
it's
opening
very
here.
like not really doing anything, but this feels like I don't feel it in my shoulder and elbow when I got and then when I go here, it's like all shoulder and all elbow.
Yeah,
Like
well, and
when
you
I do
see,
this, it's massaging my neck.
well, yes, and now you can take it to these like especially now that was the skeletal circuit that creates that irradiation of tensional balance as opposed to tensional restriction, right? Tensional restriction, tensional balance. This is fast and fluid. This is stuck, blocky, and injured, frankly. So you have a little window of opportunity as a human being to set it and then move and experience the fluidity, right?
Mhm.
So that the proximal has at least run reps that feel amazing. Now, let go of the hands. You'll let go of some of the effect, but some of the intelligence of that fluid positioning, timing, etc., the flow, some of that will stick around and you'll be a little bit better. And if you do it and do it and do it and do it, and you physically get good at it, you end up getting this proximal fluidity that you couldn't get had you not harnessed the hands
So
to free up the proximal by tensioning the hands with correct position and intent.
so I have a question here because while I do feel more fluid, I had talked to a fascia guy, and when I asked him about the core fist, the specifics were they didn't like it because of the tensioning of the body and where you want to be fluid. So now that we're trying it out, like Brett and I just did it, we felt more fluid. Where Okay, so we don't want to be tense when we're sprinting. We don't want to be tense
Well,
when we're trying to be
wait a minute.
athletic.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Running reps, squeezing a core fist in the A fist position as hard as you can, hitting double down, that's a useful rep.
Right.
And some guys will feel that they run faster with it than without it.
Mm-hmm.
World records have been won with the hands splayed and tense. Okay. World records have been won. Okay. Carl Lewis at the end, that thing is splayed and tense. It's not
Mm-hmm.
relaxed. It's tense. Ben
So would you
Johnson,
say this is
right?
just more
Bang.
organized
What I'm
than
saying, what
this?
I'm saying is that yes, it's better organized, not more, but better
Mm.
organized. And this will create a connective tissue recoil and it will not slow me down. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have enough sprinters who have even tried it because the number is probably less than 50 because every one of those people, and they weren't even sprinters. But I did work with Lex Gillette, who does the Paralympic Games as a sprinter and a long jumper, and his guide runner, Wesley Williams, in 2010, where I taught him to line up with the core fist and squeeze as hard as he could, prop it up from the very start. And he ran his fastest 100 meters proximal to that time frame and has never run faster since and is no longer doing this. So that's just a one-off case, but we don't have anywhere near a data pool of people who would actually be faster with it because that
Mm-hmm.
requires the ability to even know what to do and then the motivation to really want to do it. Those are two necessary ingredients if you're going to test something. You have to have the motivation to actually invest to it to test it. But
Right.
I I just I love it, but I also despise it that oh these fascia guys, oh they don't like the core fist because it's tense. You pussies. But what the hell are we talking about? It's hard and it's soft in both directions. Optimize both sides utilized. Oh, I like it because it's tense. Well, oh, you like your stiff ankles when you run, don't you? I mean, it is so pathetic that
Mm-hmm.
someone could argue that this isn't what it is. Okay. That is someone whose ego cannot allow them to accept the fact that I'm more knowledgeable. All right. I'm not even going to
So
claim smarter, but I probably am. And I'm
so
smart. I'm
let's
smarter IQ. I'm smarter than Mike Israetel. Mr. David here. Mr. David.
And you know what? You know what's something interesting about it too is because you've gone so far deep into the studies and into learning yourself more so than the studying,
Yes.
you're able to make these connections and then you're able to feel it. And then because I remember when we were in San Diego, you just knew where the point was. You know what I mean? When we were standing on the Weck deck and you hang your big toe off, you don't figure that out. You know what I mean? You don't read a book and you're like, "Oh, if I hang my big toe off something, I'm going to feel a total body relaxation."
Well, you said the word because, and I think this is fun because you do figure it out. That's how you figure it out is you figure, right? In form, shape, position, That's the only way you're going to find out is if you figure the right configuration. And so literally what am I doing here but figuring the structure so that it can now transmit force fluidly. And if you're a fascia guy and you're telling me you don't want to go to 100% with everything, well, how you going to get to zero? How you know what you got? If I don't go to 100 and 100 with 100% freedom and fluidity, and that's 100 and it's 100%, well, then what do you want me to do instead? Huh, Mr. Fascia? You see, for me, it's insulting because I'm so far beyond their comprehension that it is annoying and frustrating that these children, okay, keep on, they don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know what they don't know. And if you're going to come at me and say that I don't know what I'm doing, it is because you are ignorant or malice. You want harm on me, right? And a lot of people in this industry genuinely want harm on me. Okay, harm. I'm talking about the PhD guys, right? The Lance Brookses of the world, right? Oh, I'm a
You know what?
PhD and I study locomotion and I hate the Bosu ball and I hate Weck. This is legitimately real. Lance Brooks is informed or his actions are dictated by malice against me to his detriment and everyone else's. Everyone. He's
So then,
guilty. He's guilty.
going back to gait, going back to the hands. We talk about the feet and we talk about the hands. Modern exercise has no concept of the hands and the feet. Most people when they go in a gym, you don't see people grab a dumbbell and intentionally put the wrist in. The simple things like foot position, simple things like wrist position is never it's never even thought about. And so what if you kind of to make your your whole ideology mainstream, make it about building muscle, because we all know that if you change the position of your wrist when you do a lat pull down, you're getting into the back.
Yes. Well, as a matter of fact, you say that. I actually have a colleague, okay, named Edward Troyce, who is addressing that. Because what he told me, and this is going back, I don't know, year and a half ago or something like that. He said, David, what I want to do, right? Add what's uniquely your own. He said, I want to provide education for gym bros who want to show and go, not just show. And so if you look at Edward, his musculature is aspirational, right? He's a guy who can take 360 pounds and toss it over his shoulder, no problem, right? He can go 1,000,000 miles an hour with the rope. If you were going to get in a race with him, you're probably going to lose. You get in a fight with him, you're probably going to lose unless you're trained in both of those endeavors. So that we're going to, what I like is I like the idea that I'm Tom Sawyer in terms of my sort of savvy to sit back, relax, and do nothing while everything good happens. Okay. That's what I want. I don't want to have to paint the fence. I just want everybody to really have a great time in their own interest and benefit, paint the fence, right? That's what I want. I've been at this a long time. You guys are just at the very beginning. You're just like you dove in and now you're coming up for your first breath of air. While I've swum across, drowned a couple times, So you guys get the benefit of whatever knowledge I can impart upon you at your journey's beginning. And now that will accelerate the pace and the depth with which you can discover things that I didn't discover. Oh shit, wow, ooh, cool, right? and I get mine because I was 10 fingers for you climbing higher. And
Mhm.
I don't care who you are, if you breathe, right? And if you move, I know the foundation to help you do that the absolute best. Make God very, very proud and happy of you that you at least figured out physical integrity. He'll forgive you for, a few fibs and lies. And if you believe in something else, well, maybe in the day of reckoning, you'll figure it out. Who knows? But physical integrity, I like to think God, we aren't God, but God is us, is what I think. And I think God can come down and step into anyone's shoes just to check it out from that perspective, see what it's like, right? And I think if I'm God and I were to come down and you're walking stiff, I'd be pissed off. I'd be like, really, dude? Like, this is what you're doing? You're not even taking a step with physical integrity? And your impatience and your frustration that you don't even know is nagging at you, and it's so small and insignificant that it will take 10 million reps of this slight tiny leak in the tire to have an effect, right? But it's had an effect the whole time, right? You weren't as flexible in your thinking because physically you were restricted, tension was rising. You thought strength was going to conquer it, but you didn't realize that you have to go through soft to optimize speed and power. Speed and power need to understand smooth.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they're not fast. They're not powerful. Smooth is what we need to build. We need to build, and smooth can include heavy weightlifting. Okay. So
Mhm.
I'm not one of these guys who's going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and tell Saquon Bartley not to squat 500 pounds. If that guy wants to squat 500 pounds at a bar speed that looks like it's 200 pounds, God bless him, right? Let him do it. Maybe it helps him do a backflip over a guy in the game, right? Maybe it does.
Mhm.
And I would say if I held my hand up, I'm saying that no, he didn't suddenly become slow and stiff because he lifted heavy weights. Okay. You hear the fascia people saying this or that. If I had a football team and I'm the coach, especially certain positions, you're hitting the fucking weights or go play for someone else.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
So going back to that, it's a combination of everything, and I can even talk to my own experience getting injured and having to go through that period of the slow in order to relearn the body, reteach the body, and fast cannot exist if slow isn't controlled.
Bingo. And most people jump to fast and they're only ever encouraged faster, 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 faster. If we say smoother, 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 we will get to faster than you ever could have got if you just started out with faster, faster, faster. More force, faster, more force, faster. All right, well, where is smooth in the equation? That's just
Mhm.
up to your natural athleticism, right? Guy like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was a better basketball player after he did traditional weightlifting, okay? He was better. Trust me, he was better, especially in the 1980s when, skinny Michael Jordan wouldn't make it through a season. Barry Bonds was better from conventional weightlifting than he would have been without it. Okay. So stronger is better if it doesn't come at the expense of smooth and fast and restricting range of motion. Like you could get too big where you can't button your shirt. And now you could argue that lifting weights is bad for buttoning your shirt because it would be if you got that big, right? And that would probably be too big to swing a baseball bat the way that you swing a baseball bat. But you pack on 30 pounds of your just muscle over a career, whatever the hell he put on. He put on a lot of muscle. He's better, right? So I like reality. And I don't like these non-realities where we're creating problems where they don't exist because some of it is problematic because the people administering it don't understand that you begin with the end in mind. The end is not
Mhm.
just better numbers in a weight room. That has nothing to do with anything in terms of getting paid to play sports. Right? You have the best numbers at the combine ever. And if you can't play the game, well then who cares?
I mean, going back to Michael Jordan, it's a prime example that weightlifting, bodybuilding, all of that can be good if certain things are in place.
And
And
it's a rite of passage.
right.
Once you've built the muscles, you don't need to keep building more muscles, right? It's a maintenance, which is very easy to do compared to building muscle. It's very hard to do, right? You can maintain your
Very true.
muscles and you can get back to your muscles so easy, right? It's so easy, but it's getting there that's the hard part.
For the general population that won't prescribe to a full Weck methodized training program or a full go to training program or a full functional patterns type of training program, what are the two things that they could do on a daily basis that will allow the fluidity, allow the connectivity, allow the integration while doing the bodybuilding type exercise program?
Well, to best answer that question, what I'll say is that Weck method does give you the option, if you so desire, to Weck methodize everything. Okay,
Right.
the manner in which you're going to emphasize the pinky on your concentration curl, okay, to get a deeper curl. The way that you're going to pose using the fourth finger and ringing to get a better pose in your biceps, right? That's Weck methodization. So the other systems have no answer for what your hand does when you're doing whatever, right? I can guarantee you that, you know, the boys in the bayou have nothing for the hands. Okay, nothing. Okay, and I can guarantee you that the Noid has next to nothing for the hands. Okay, next to nothing for the hands. And if they do, it would be like, oh, I can squeeze harder. Okay, but that's great. I'm all for it. Squeeze as hard as you can, and that's good. Get stronger at it. I got no problem with you being strong like this. But if you can't do the other stuff, well, you don't have the capacity to frame everything for anyone,
That
right?
just gave me an interesting question. Is there any WEC method hacks to getting a stronger grip test score? Because we do that at our gym. We have it on the board.
Yeah, well, Jesus. Well, first of all, I will say that my 2 decades of exploration, a lot of it was on the softer side. Okay. So I did forego grip strength in terms of squeezing because I was investing in big hand grip strong and then skeletal architecture strong. So my grip strength is pathetic. And like, I bought a grip tester, okay, and I'm handing it around the lab. And some people are like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to because they're afraid they're going to be bad. And I squeezed it in. Everybody's like, Chris gets 154 or something like that. And then Dustin gets like 120. Marty gets like 132 or whatever the hell it is. I squeeze the damn thing and get a 94. And I press the button and I go race it. And then I squeeze and I really dig in and I get like 115. So I'm still humiliated. But what I would say is for something as simple as just grip strength, it's training it properly. And I would say that what you would do to Weck methodize that is you would now like coil and explore how you're going to bring your body's weight into the equation of how you're going to, squeeze it just a little bit harder by, if you try to open the pickle jar like this, you're going to get a lot better if you sort of go like that. You know what I
I'm gonna
mean?
play with that. I'm gonna play with that.
Yeah,
I'll
so
play with
play,
that.
play with that, like, and don't just think about this side. Think about this
Yeah.
side, like,
Okay.
and literally conjure in your mind's eye that the more I get length and strength, the more I can activate my grip. So
All right. I'm gonna
explore
do
that
that.
and see what happens, right?
I have
All
one
right.
last
Well,
question before we wrap.
I have a final question as well.
Okay.
I have a final question as well.
So my last question is something that I've been exploring at the moment is keeping a certain level of bend in the knee to keep the hamstrings going because I was told, funny enough, by functional patterns people when they were critiquing my stuff that I have too much whip in my knees when I do my kettlebell stuff. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it. So I started learning, started watching your guys' stuff, specifically Chris, started watching your walk, started going into all the people that I respect in the industry, looking at Judd Leinhardt when he does kettlebell stuff, and I was noticing that there was no extension of the knee. There was no like the knee doesn't ever get straight.
Mm.
So explain that. Like why does the knee being straight take tension off of the hamstring? And does it take tension off the hamstring? So like a full bent RDL, is that taking tension off the hamstring? I mean a stiff legged RDL.
Well, what I would say is you were a swimmer who
Mhm.
probably did articulate to the point where you're like almost benefiting from going to like closer to straight, perhaps. I don't
Well,
know.
yes, that
Right.
was what made me really good at kicking and really good at
Yeah.
and really good
Right.
at dolphin
Right. So
kicks.
you can whip the leg as opposed to just sort of move the leg.
Right.
So that would sort of, your body had potentiated that sort of action, and then, the gung ho fun of, when you got to the top, you snapped everything and your knees snapped too, which
Mhm.
might be an interesting exploration, because then it's just the rate of, flex that's going to determine. And then do you notch out at straight, where it like changes the relationship, almost creates like a hinge effect, it takes it off and it sort of glitches. That will probably be bad, and I think some
Mhm.
people would experience that if they straighten a leg like that. I would say that from a moving your mass through space, it would be very rare where the full extension of the knee would be useful, because on the ground it will never get there, because you would be sacrificing shin angle and forward intent.
Mhm.
And in the air, I don't think it ever gets there either, because I want to be getting back to the front quicker than if I were to straighten it all the way. So I think your observation that a lot of these really good movers aren't tending to straighten to full length probably corroborates that, okay, yeah, you probably don't want to do that if you're, you could think of some circumstance, I suppose, where you would want to do it. So having the capacity would be better than not having the capacity. And then as far as like, sort of a straight legged deadlift, I think you're probably going to get a greater functional transfer from a slight bend and slight softness in the knee, because then you're still transmitting that force sort of, through that musculature down through the joint. Whereas if you were to lock it out, you may turn off some stuff, especially the
Mhm.
front, where
Right.
you may sacrifice sort of like a global pressure that would be advantageous. And then again, going to full straight, maybe if you're a bodybuilder, you could eke out some little gain on one of the hamstrings by locking it straight. So that would be a case by case, I would imagine. You know,
And one of my biggest observations since I started realizing and realistically where I started understanding or started thinking about the knee being straight was when we went to San Diego and you were talking about what Mike Boyle was saying with that exercise of pulling
oh
the knee
yeah,
back. And
right.
that's when that thought process started. But when my knees are fully straight, I don't have my weight in my forefoot, hence the shin angle.
Yeah, well, and I would say that exercise that I saw him teaching, like that's one where if I'm like the older trainer and he's just the 18-year-old trainer, I look at him with like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? You're going the wrong direction, right? Like, I didn't see any benefit to doing that particular exercise,
I mean, he
because
also says that women shouldn't run, so but like
I mean, but what I'm saying is that exercise is literally going and walking by some trade show booth that has that particular elastic band, and then, hey, can you show us something that you would do with it? Just sort of cordial, like, hey, this is a nifty little product. Okay, great. Well, do you mind if we film you? Do something. And that's, think of it on the spot, talk about the muscles or whatever. But no knowledge of where bullseye is, so that you're literally aiming 180 degrees wrong. So you're doing an exercise that I would argue would only potentiate a wrong strong from a structural standpoint and even more so a neurological standpoint, where your body's becoming familiar with something that you don't want it to do, which would be go backward to full straight vulnerability. Right? When your leg is perfectly straight, that's when your knee is most vulnerable. Is the straighter and more locked out it is, any kind of a blow, you got nowhere to go. Like that's just, shred the whole thing. You know what I mean?
100%. So final question. I want to leave the audience with some practical tips that we can all benefit from. So three easy steps if I wanted to dehydrate my fascia.
Get drunk. Get drunk in the morning when you have a hangover. Just nip the dog with more alcohol, and then go run a marathon in the hot weather, right? And take a hot sauna, and don't drink water. Just drink like Monster or something like that. I think that,
Hey, listen, a good white Monster and a black coffee in the morning is a recipe to success, if you ask me.
hey, listen to me. When I grew up, I had friends who they told me the greatest thing in the morning is coffee and a cigarette. And for me, it's coffee and a knick-knack. Coffee and a knick-knack. Now, it's an addictive substance, so we got to say that. But code Weck is 10% off.
And that's how we shut it down right there. Code Weck, 10% off. If you want to dehydrate your fascia, you know exactly what to do. Another great episode of the Power Talks podcast. We're out. Peace.